Discuss. Today we turn the spotlight on Nigeria's social protection system, a framework that's often tested in times of economic strain, inflation and subsidy removal. With millions of Nigerians struggling to meet basic needs, the question now is, are palliatives enough, or is it time to redesign the entire social safety net? Over the years, successive administrations have introduced intervention programs aimed at cushioning hardship from cash transfers to food distributions, yet concerns persist over the sustainability, transparency, and reach of these measures.
Many argue that the system focuses too much on short-term relief rather than addressing the structural roots of poverty and inequality. As the cost of living continues to rise, experts are calling for a broader data-driven approach that integrates employment creation, healthcare access, and digital inclusion into social welfare policies. The conversation has shifted from charity-based assistance to rights-based model that empowers citizens rather than merely supports them. And joining us this morning to unpack this crucial conversation is our guest, who is the Executive Director, African Network for Environment, Economic Justice, David Ugolor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, Nigeria often treats social protection as a standalone welfare handout. How can it deliberately be woven into job creation, care, and education policies so it drives real economic mobility rather than dependency?
Again, I want to thank you for inviting me to this discussion, which again provides opportunity to respond to some of these issues. Like you rightly noted in your question, the only way to do this is the political will, because government must demonstrate through budgeting processes by investing in the social protection projects and programs. And I'm happy that this government, since it came on board, has continued to put priority on the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction. I think that ministry has the responsibility to drive this investment. But the real challenge is how the National Assembly, as the member of the parliament, also work with the executive to put priority on channeling resources to the social protection investment in the country. But how government do this is about, again, identifying the institutional framework and looking into the social protection policy in the country. And government must demonstrate by putting in more capable hands to run those agencies. For instance, in Nigeria, for you to be part of the beneficiary of the social investment, either the cash transfer program or any of this program, you have to be, your name has to be in the National Social Register. And the National Social Register, unfortunately, is not able to cover some of these programs very efficiently. So they need to be reformed. They need to be strengthened. And to strengthen that institutional framework, the federal government must, again, take the responsibility to provide leadership. And that is exactly what can begin to send the right signal to provide that framework. Because government alone can't, again, pursue the social protection program in the country. And I'm happy that the private sectors are increasingly showing interest, because if you look the impact of poverty in the country, which ultimately social protection program is aimed at addressing, is a huge threat to investment, is a huge threat to the economy, is a huge threat to the entire country. And as you know, the vulnerable ones are not as politically active in terms of engaging key political elite who decides where resources go. And that's why some of us, through our projects, like the At Niger project that is mobilizing advocacy around this issue, likes to link up with the media, like what TVC is doing today, to bring an attention to this issue and driving conversation towards making the social protection program a priority policy agenda for government.
Okay, good enough. I think also that because of the level of the economic situation in the country, talking about social protection should be a key aspect of every government. But a challenge we do have is with each successive administration, you have their own projects they want to pursue. We used to have what is called the Empower and all that, and school feeding program, and short-lived. With the exit of an administration, a new administration comes. And also you talked about the social register. Now, why is it difficult for us for now, this moment, to have a register that is robust? We have series of data we've been capturing. Can't we have a data that will understand that certain individuals have moved away from employment jobs and they have retired, so they have moved into a new circle where they need protection, and so that those data are there for us to bounce on, and also the institutionalized framework, so that it will not just be an ad hoc policy. And also, can we also criminalize when it becomes a political tool?
I completely agree with you. And the National Social Register is a framework that is undergoing reform from time to time. And the government have made commitment by way of ensuring that more people who has fallen into that vulnerable group, particularly as a result of the economic reform. The removal of the OEF subsidy has really, again, affected the livelihood of quite a number of people across the country. So you have more people who are out there now who has fallen into this bracket of poverty and that need to be enlisted into the social register. And so the expansion of the social register is germane. It helps, again, to put very clearly that there's an increasing number of people who are falling into that bracket of poverty, and that there's need for government to put more investment. And that's the reason why I said earlier on that our budget will determine and will speak to that fact. How government allocate resources determine the importance they attaches to what policy agenda. Like I said, the vulnerable ones are very weak. They are not organized. They hardly get attention. If you look, for example, you take the national newspaper for today, just look the review, the front page. You find very oftentimes no report on the poor. It is very political elite crisis. Today now, it is the minister who have resigned that have covered the whole entire front page of all the mainstream newspaper. It's one scandal to another. But the truth is that takes us away from the real issue, because the real issue in the country today is poverty. And I'm happy that in the next few weeks or 2 weeks' time, the world will be celebrating the World Poverty Day. And the World Poverty Day is focusing on family because of the impact of poverty in family. And without family well properly organized, you can't talk about democracy. Okay. Poverty is actually hinging on this. And that's why policies like the National Social Register, all the key agencies that are responsible to help the federal government align their policy in a way that it is not politicized, because that's the key language.
Right,
it's very important.
Yeah, I like the fact that you highlighted poverty as the main issue in this crisis that we currently have. But we'll talk about the practical policy shifts right after the short break. Don't go anywhere. We still have more for you on the program. To have you back, let's continue our conversation on enhancing productivity of our social protection systems. Now, Mr. Ugolor, we've seen waves of food palliatives and cash transfers, yet millions of Nigerians still remain vulnerable. I would like to ask, what practical policy shifts should we begin to look at? Should we begin to take a look at our tax reforms or targeted subsidies or social insurance models? What practical steps do we need to take to enhance this social protection system?
I think it is, first, is the institutions that manage the social protection policy in Nigeria. When I mean the institution, is that the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, they have responsibility to oversee the implementation of the social protection program in Nigeria. And for the effective implementation of social protection in Nigeria, the president has to make it a priority. Like I said, the vulnerable ones, the very poor in the society, are very weak. They are not organized. And you know, in politics, the very organized group, for example, you have the politicians, the elite, the different groups, they are very organized. And that influences how government allocate resources. And the poor across the country, whether from the north or the south or the west or the east, they are not organized. So when the National Assembly is conducting their annual ritual of allocating resources, this organized group have a way of engaging. And in the process of engaging, that determines where resources go. I can tell you as we speak, the resources going to Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction is nothing to write home about. It's really, it doesn't indicate government priority as you see in the newspaper, the actual resources that is going. And then the key agency under the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs is also another issue. For example, NASCO, the agency that is responsible for overseeing the National Social Register. If you don't capacitate these institutions, they are not able to carry out this assignment of ensuring that the social register is run in a way that agencies will now rely on the social register to mine those who are going to be beneficiary becomes a problem.
Mr. Ugolor, if I may come
Yes.
in here, please. You said that government allocation is not substantial
Yes.
to the humanitarian.
Exactly. Commensurate with the level of poverty that we are seeing in the country.
Disagree, because I would like to know the missing link. Is it from the release or what is allocated in the budget? Because I know that there is a good substantial amount being allocated to humanitarian welfare in the budget. So is it in the point of the release or in the point of the allocation?
I think the real challenge is the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs not also being able to articulate this challenge. And then if you also recall, the problem that happened in the previous administration, I've also put a kind of a negative tag on the ministry. So, there's what we call trust deficit. So the current leadership of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs are facing those challenges, that challenge of trust deficit. Even the International Donor Agency continue to see the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs from that story that came up from the last regime, where billions of naira were going to private pocket instead of going to the very poor. And that really was not very encouraging. Okay, and that gave a setback. So what I would say that the difference between what is allocated the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and what really goes to the very poor is a big challenge. Okay. And from our own experience for monitoring, in tracking, for example, the recovered Abacha loot of $325 million that was used for cash transfer that benefited over 2 million people across the country. One key element of it all is that you have to put in place a monitoring and evaluation framework that will ensure that when resources are released, it gets to the very poor. That mechanism is absent, it's not efficient, and that's exactly what. So it doesn't really matter. So I completely agree with you that even if it is 1 billion that is allocated, we must ensure that it gets to the people, okay, because that would help to scale up the impact.
Let's take a look at our approach. A lot of time we try to drive these things from the federal. Every Nigerian is, first of all, a citizen of a particular state.
Yes.
He's from a local government before he becomes, enter the wider circle Nigerian.
Yes.
Are the various subnationals also measuring up? Because if we put the burden of social protection on the federal government, and the states are not doing enough, the local governments are not doing enough, we're going to have a wider gap. The gap will keep widening. Completely. So how can the states and the local governments prioritize this, especially in the next budget? So it will not be a federal government-driven approach. It will be an approach is driven by the various states.
Thank you very much. This is a really germane question, and this is the way to go. We live in a federal system of government. We have 36 states and over 700 local governments. The federal government alone cannot solve the problem of poverty in Nigeria. And I'm happy that one of the beneficiaries from the removal of subsidy in this current regime is the state government and local government. A lot of resources is now moving to the states, a lot of resources is now moving to the local government. But how the difference of these resources is used for the benefit of the people is a different challenge entirely. But the federal government, under the President Tinubu regime, has a responsibility to take steps to empower voices like us, to ensure that the public is aware about these resources that is going to the state and the local government. And then the governor will be put on pressure to deliver. Because the state government, some of the state government have not even put in place a proper social register. And that makes it difficult to transparently monitor how they go about their social protection program. Like, for example, in Delta State, we've seen how the governor has tried to put priority on social protection program. But you see, the question is that who is benefiting? Is it politicized? What is the amount of resources that is coming from the state to complement what is coming from the federal government? All those will become available when the data is available in the public. And then you also look about what kind of data, what kind of information that is out there to the public for the media to be able to use. Like the question she asked a while ago about what is the difference really, so that we begin to know what the really gap in resources that we are talking about. Because this is really difficult for us to point to. Because each time we say there is not enough resources, it will be more reasonable to see what the difference really are. But if you go to the website of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs or Poverty Alleviation Ministry, difficult for you to find some of this data. And then it becomes difficult and people begin to speculate. And speculation is not good for a democratic society. It's not good for the government. So my recommendation, responding to your question, is that the federal government alone cannot solve the problem of poverty in Nigeria. The resources that currently go into the states, particularly flowing from the removal of oil subsidy, Nigerians should rise. And that's exactly what our project is doing, co-funded by the European Union on Act Niger, how civil society can mobilize with media to track this huge humongous money currently going to the states. The state governments need to put some substantial part of that resources for social protection. Social protection will help address these vulnerable groups, these very poor, who are currently suffering under the economic reform of this current regime. Yes.
Well, you have highlighted the issue of funding, and you have also highlighted the issue of data,
yes,
which I believe has led to leakages and mismanagement,
yes,
in social protection systems like this. How can these programs be insulated from corruption and political capture?
For example, the first key thing is that first I must commend the EFCC. You know, when it happened that some substantial resources from the Ministry of Humanitarian and Poverty Reduction Affairs was being mismanaged, EFCC stepped into it and unpack the corruption scandal. But and that again sent a very strong signal, because the culture of impunity mustn't be encouraged. When somebody, the difference between developed countries that are doing well and developing country like Nigeria who is not doing well is that when people commit crime, they have to face the music. There must be consequence. And that's why I'm happy that what has happened today, that the minister have also resigned. You know, when people commit crime, nothing happens, it encourages people to continue to participate in crime. So those who were involved in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs in this scam, they even though they have moved on, we would like to see that the money is recovered, like EFCC have also claimed, and then we have to see how this money returns back to the ministry, and then under the current leadership we have in the ministry now, and see that the resources go to the very poor who are supposed to be the beneficiary. And so my take would be that to end corruption is to strengthen institutions like EFCC. They're doing a fantastic work, which they did before. They should strengthen them to put economic crime as a top agenda, because the real challenge we are having in the country is that the level of corruption in the public sector is huge among us, and for government to be able to pursue fighting corruption at the public sector level, there must be transparency and accountability and disclosure and beneficial ownership of company, because most of these resources that is stolen from the public sector via procurement and all kind of contract shady deals ends in the real estate. And so that's why we are all campaigning, raising awareness about the value of having beneficial ownership, because you can then draw a linkage who owns the real estate properties in Abuja, in Port Harcourt, in Lagos, and then you can draw a linkages. And if you see of recent, most of these stolen resources ends in real estate business, and that's the real challenge that we face. So EFCC, ICPC, they need to be strengthened. They're doing a fantastic work. They need to be strengthened and be empowered. Government has to show the political will to bring to justice anytime any one of these government officials are caught in this economic crime.
Okay, let's take a look at the civil society, your organization and its like. How much evaluation have you carried out of the various states? And it's easy for us to say, okay, monitor what the federal government is releasing. We have the geopolitical zones, we have the various states. Have you been able to go to the various states and ask questions and look at what they are doing? If they're not doing it, why are we not calling out the states that you are not doing what you should be doing? So that the focus will not be on we evaluating what the federal is doing. By that, we'll gradually begin to move
shift the pressure.
Exactly to the states. But if we're not talking about what the states is doing or what they're not doing, then we're putting too much pressure on the federal.
No, that's exactly. So that's exactly what our project is currently doing. We first organized a national dialogue in Abuja, where we brought all stakeholders together. A kind of a multi-stakeholder approach, a dialogue on social protection. What is not working? What are the gaps? How do we address them? And we have done that at the federal government level. We want to commend the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. We're very supportive. And now we have now carried out this dialogue at the state in Borno, in Delta, in Kogi, and then in Enugu, and it's going on in the southwest Ekiti and other states, in about 7 states where this project is impacting. What is the whole core game for this dialogue? We are shifting away from we not go agree kind of approach of activism in looking how do we add value, because we live in a knowledge economy. You need to bring some value on the table. As civil society, we have a capacity on this area, and that's exactly what we're doing with this dialogue. And hopefully, we're building a consensus on how to move this forward. All
right, Mr. David Ugolor, it's a pleasure speaking with you this morning. Thank you so much for shining light on this very crucial topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And also our viewers, thank you for being a part of the conversation. We'll now hand you over to Lagos, where Ria and the rest of the team are standing by to continue with the rest of the show.
All right, thank you so much, Abuja. Very timely conversation. Thank you.